we're innovating new technologies in the area of product discovery at the intersection of big data, analytics, and user experience. We're a wonderful little company based in Austin, Texas. We're backed by world-class investors including Brett Hurt, Sam Decker, and Floodgate Capital. But let's talk about today. So each and every one of you here today is responsible in some way, shape, or form for driving an online consumer to a decision. Preferably, we'd like that to be a purchasing decision. And as user experience professionals, we constantly think about how to optimize our digital experiences to drive consumers to that fateful decision to pull out their credit card and make a purchase. The problem is that, as you might know, as we all know, the path to getting a consumer from on my site to making that purchase can be somewhat difficult. There's many factors that come in play, some magical, some analytical, some you pray. But honestly, today we're going to talk a lot about how to make that more realistic. I think today's discussions and thoughts and theories are going to help us learn how to break through to real consumer insight and ultimately to find a financial opportunity. I'm a big believer that there's two core principles that drives user experience innovation, and that is careful measurement and constructed understanding. So what do I mean by that? So measurement, you think of web analytics, you think of kind of like the core facts and figures and stats. But really, Louis Rosenfeld puts it very well. Measurement is about getting the stats, the core, the driving towards down to the what of what's going on. Now, the user experience side helps us take all those stats and those hard figures and put a softer layer of understanding around it. It's more of the attitudinal, the qualitative, the why of what's going on. And both of these two things play together in a very important way. So one of the first questions you have to ask yourself when you're constructing your measurement strategy is not so much how do you measure or what technology do you use, but it's actually much more important to know what to measure, because that can have a huge impact on the stats you produce, the facts you figure out, even the things that actually come out of that data. For example, one of the simplest things about figuring out what to measure is fundamentally you have to have something to measure. Didn't have zoom information on their cameras, which is interesting for a camera manufacturer, but actually also made it very difficult to understand how consumers make decisions or even to how to optimize decisions in that around their site. More importantly, once we filled in zoom as well as also a variety of other attributes, we not only found that conversion rates skyrocketed, but also that up to 26% of all decisions around that category actually use zoom as a key criteria. It's just important to know that you don't know what you don't know, and you can't measure what's not precise. Another concept, a lot of us here are content creators. We manage content creation teams, we manage the design, development of videos, guides, etc. And often one of the big questions we ask from an analytics perspective, I remember at least from where I sat at Bizarre Voice, in terms of getting asked how reviews impact decision behavior, was how do I know if I'm spending my money correctly on videos or guides, etc. And one of the key takeaways that I had from that experience is that if you're going to ask the question, how does content impact decision making, the content actually has to be at the point where somebody makes decisions. We see a lot of e-commerce leaders who have wonderful, wonderful silos of blogs and videos and product guides and all sorts of wonderful things. But the problem is that they exist in silos, separate from the browse path. And so when you go to ask the question of, well, how much, what's the ROI of that video that I just created? Or what's the ROI of that guide that we spent so much money on? Well, the problem is that if you're trying to measure that at the point when it actually had impact, it's very difficult to attribute any kind of value, because by the point that the consumer has arrived at the catalog page where they're making an actual browsing and purchasing decision with that data, they've already forgotten what they came there for. So one of the other interesting things is when you're trying to suss out kind of the more macro effects or the more user experience side of that. So say once you have your analytics, once you have your instrumentation all put together, you want to look for both the macro and micro kind of effects basically. One of the most interesting things that came out of my research at Bazaar Voice was what I called the rule of 7. It was a very simple principle, is that what we found was that the optimal review, or the optimal conversion lift from review content occurred after 7 reviews were on the page. And this is actually comes from a very interesting behavior in the sense of how people just consume content. One of the things basically is that we have a limited amount of time as online shoppers, and no matter how many reviews are on the page, we're only going to read ultimately 15 to 20 reviews in our browsing session. Now, this is an interesting effect in the sense of if your job is to redesign a product page, knowing that the optimal number of reviews to read is around 7 or whatever the number is for your site is really important to know. Okay, well, I should have 7 pieces of reviews as my maximum amount of things on the page. But let's say that you're actually trying to solve a different user experience problem. So let's say you're trying to optimize the formal wear side of a site, basically. Maybe you're you have a special project beyond just the redesign of an entire site. You actually probably be more interested in not only knowing what the macro rule is for your review behavior, but you probably want to know other people that browse in formal wear, what is the specific review, what's the review count that I care about. You'd also probably really be interested to know that it's not so much about that people only read a certain amount of reviews, but rather that a majority of that content goes unread. One of the things that we found in our research at Bazaar Voice was that a large amount of the review content out there just doesn't get read, basically. It's because in a lot of cases, people tend to read the first review on the page, and also they don't really tend to filter or browse a whole lot. And so if you're optimizing your formalware section and you want to really have user-generated content be a key part of that experience, you really care a lot about what are the most impactful reviews that you can bring to the top. What can you learn about that content that you can actually use to redesign that special section, basically? Now, the other key thing that I learned, and as user experience professionals, we often have to work with a variety of kinds of individuals, some technical, some non-technical, some our boss. But overall, we have to take what we've learned and take the analytics and data and insights that we've culled together from our hard research, and we have to evangelize them. We have to give presentations like this. We have to have a back and forth discussion. We have to have almost a vernacular with which to talk about our insights and our knowledge. And what I found in my experience is that metaphors make for a very powerful kind of a tool and vehicle to transport knowledge. In my mind, metaphors make the complex insight portable. What I'm going to talk about right now is actually this idea of pogo sticking, which was actually a metaphor that was given to me by one of my good friends at Travelocity. And it actually helped us shape the kind of the large part of the Compare platform. And it's a very simple concept. Anyone who has an online catalog has probably seen this before. So a user comes online looking for a product in a very happy way. They land on the category page from your search marketing campaign. And then they have no idea what they're looking for. They're shoppers. They're just browsing around. But they bounce back and forth between product pages. Maybe they go to one product page that was at the top of the list. They read some content, maybe some reviews, see a price, some pictures. Maybe they watch a video. Then they'll bounce back to the category page, maybe do some refinements, go back and forth, basically. Literally pogo sticking from across the entire site. This is the traditional linear browse path for most e-commerce sites today. But what I found fascinating was that the pogo sticking idea was also a way to resonate with the fact that people were dropping out of this browse path, right? Consumers might start, and actually maybe half of them start actually going into the first review or the first product listing. But then after that, a couple of bounces, people get distracted, people lose interest, or they just they don't think they're finding what they need, right? And at the end of the day, you see the result of, I have low conversion rates on my inbound, SEM campaigns. And what we found was using this metaphor, we were able to talk with and evangelize kind of this principle for us. And more importantly, we were able to talk with customers, and we had a shared language around which to talk about, how this principle manifested itself within their own e-commerce experience. And it allowed us basically to, innovate in a variety of ways, both from a product standpoint in terms of creating more adaptive commerce experiences. We ended up developing the ability to bring in features that matter. We ended up being able to create an endless browse page. We were able to solve problems that we could talk to customers about and that they could relate to. In the same way, as a user experience professional, we're about solving problems. And oftentimes, we have to sometimes create our own metrics, our own metaphors per se, but we have to make sure they're tailored to the way that our stakeholders think about them. And so I'm going to leave you today with, as we kind of start off this discussion, is that I want you to take that idea of the metaphor, and I want you to take this idea of measurement and understanding. And I believe very, very specifically that both understanding and measurement are just kind of like pillars around which the real work research experience happens, which is discussion, a back and forth conversation about the principles with which we're trying to solve towards. And I think that today will be a great day in terms of thinking about through a variety of those issues.